The explosion tore through the mining station's eastern corridor, and Jake Mitchell felt the floor buckle beneath his boots. He sprinted towards the emergency pods, his lungs burning from the acrid smoke that filled the passage. Behind him, 3 more detonations ripped through the facility, each one closer than the last. The raiders had found them, just like they'd found the other human outposts along the frontier belt. Jake's hand slammed against the pod release, but nothing happened. The control panel flickered once and died. He cursed and moved to the next one, his fingers trembling as alarm klaxons wailed through the station. Through the viewport, he could see the raider ships, sleek and predatory, circling the mining platform like sharks. The corridor behind him collapsed in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. He was trapped between the dead escape pods and a wall of fire. Jake pressed his back against the cold steel, his mind racing through impossible options. This was how it ended, he thought. Alone on a forgotten rock at the edge of civilized space. Then the wall beside him exploded inward. Jake threw up his arms as debris scattered across the floor. When he looked up, a figure stood in the opening, backlit by emergency lighting. She was tall, easily 7 feet, with armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. Her skin held a faint blue luminescence, and her eyes glowed like distant stars. She moved toward him with fluid precision, each step deliberate and controlled. "You," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "I've been searching the galaxy for you, human." Jake stared at her, his back still pressed against the wall. "You've got the wrong person. I'm nobody." She reached him in 2 strides, her hand closing around his arm with surprising gentleness. "You are Jake Mitchell. You were born on Earth, in the city of Detroit. Your genetic markers were flagged in the Imperial Archives 3 cycles ago." She pulled him toward the breach in the wall. "And you are the only reason I'm here. The station's coming apart," Jake managed, stumbling after her as another explosion rocked the structure. "I know. I'm the one who set the charges." She led him through the gap into a service tunnel he hadn't known existed. The raiders were a convenient cover. Jake's mind reeled. "You destroyed the station? There were 40 people here. There were 39 others here. They evacuated 17 minutes ago. I made sure of it." She moved through the darkness with perfect confidence, navigating the twisting passage without hesitation. You, however, were difficult to isolate. You kept trying to save everyone else. They emerged into a docking bay Jake had never seen before, hidden deep in the station's infrastructure. A ship waited there, unlike anything in the human fleet. Its hull seemed to shift and flow, reflecting colors that didn't quite exist in normal space. "Get in," she commanded, pulling him toward the boarding ramp. Jake resisted, digging in his heels. "Not until you tell me what's happening." "Why me? What do you want?" She turned to face him fully, and he saw something in those luminous eyes that looked almost like fear. "Because you carry something in your blood that shouldn't exist. Something that was stolen from my people 10,000 years ago, before humanity even knew fire." Her grip tightened. "And every empire in the galaxy is looking for it." The station groaned, its frame beginning to tear itself apart. She didn't wait for his response, simply lifted him and carried him into the ship. The boarding ramp sealed behind them as the vessel's engines hummed to life. Through the viewport, Jake watched the mining station break apart, scattering debris across the asteroid field. "My name is Kira," she said, settling into the pilot's seat. "And you have approximately 60 seconds to strap in before we make the jump to hyperspace." Jake grabbed the nearest safety harness, his hands shaking. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't follow. Somewhere I can explain why your existence just started a war." The ship leapt forward, and the stars stretched into lines of impossible light. Kira's ship cut through hyperspace like a blade through silk, and Jake couldn't take his eyes off the view screen. Colors that had no names swirled past the hull, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. He'd been on freighters before, made the standard commercial runs between colonies, but nothing had prepared him for this. Whatever technology powered Kira's vessel, it was generations beyond anything humanity had developed. "Stop staring," Kira said, without turning from her controls. "We have more important matters." Jake forced himself to look away from the hypnotic display.
"You said I carry something in my blood."
"What does that mean?" Kira's fingers danced across panels that seemed to respond to her thoughts as much as her touch. "Your species has a saying about Pandora's box, yes? You're about to learn that some boxes were never meant to be opened." She gestured, and a holographic display materialized between them. 300 years ago, human explorers found a derelict vessel drifting in the Kepler system. "Do you know this story?" "The Discovery," Jake said. "Everyone knows it. That's how we got faster-than-light travel. We reverse-engineered the technology." Half true. Kira manipulated the hologram, showing an image of a massive ship, its design organic and flowing. That vessel was a Tyranny seed ship, lost during the Great Migration. My people abandoned it 10 millennia ago, but it still contained our most precious resource. The image shifted, zooming in on crystalline chambers deep within the hull, genetic archives, biological samples from every world we'd encountered, every species we'd catalogued. Jake leaned forward, studying the display. "And humans took them? Not took. Contaminated themselves with them." Kira's eyes flashed brighter for a moment. Your scientists didn't understand what they'd found. They thought the samples were inert, dead genetic material to be studied. Instead, they accidentally released viable sequences into their research facility. Some of those researchers were exposed, and one of them was my ancestor, Jake said quietly. "Your great-great-grandmother, Dr. Lisa Mitchell. She worked in the xenobiology division." Kira pulled up another image, showing a human woman in a lab coat. The exposure should have killed her. The Tyranny genetic material is incompatible with human biology, causes cascading organ failure within hours. But your great-great-grandmother survived. More than survived. The sequences integrated into her DNA in ways we still don't understand. Jake's hands gripped the armrests of his seat. What did it do to her? Nothing visible, nothing measurable by human technology. Kira turned to face him directly. But it made her, and every one of her descendants, into something the galaxy has been fighting over for 10,000 years. You carry the genetic key to the Tyranny vaults. "I don't understand." Kira stood, pacing the small cabin with restless energy. "My people, the Tyranny, were the first to achieve faster-than-light travel. We explored the galaxy for millennia, gathering knowledge, storing it in vast repositories we called the vaults. Technology, history, the secrets of extinct civilizations, everything we learned, we preserved." She stopped, facing the view screen. Then came the Convergence War. We were destroyed, scattered across the stars. The vaults were sealed, locked with genetic codes that only Tyranny bloodlines could unlock. "But I'm not Tyranny," Jake protested. "No, you're something stranger, something impossible." Kira's reflection in the view screen looked troubled. "The sequences in your blood recognize the vault blocks. They respond to them. You're a key that shouldn't exist, created by accident, capable of opening doors that were meant to stay closed forever." The ship shuddered, and warning lights flashed across Kira's control panel. She lunged back to her seat, her hands flying over the controls. "They found us faster than I expected." "Who?" Jake asked, but he could see the answer on the view screen. 3 ships had dropped out of hyperspace behind them, angular and aggressive in design. "Cerulean hunters," Kira said grimly. "Mercenaries who sell to the highest bidder. Someone put a very large bounty on your head." The ship bucked as energy weapons carved through the space around them. "Hold on." Kira threw the ship into a dive, if such a term could apply to movement through hyperspace. Jake's stomach lurched as reality seemed to twist around them. The hunter ships followed, their weapons painting brilliant lines of destruction through the cosmic void. "Can we outrun them?" Jake shouted over the screaming alarms. "No, their ships are almost as fast as mine." Kira's jaw set in determination. "But I'm a better pilot." She proved it over the next 5 minutes of the most harrowing flight Jake had ever experienced. Kira pushed the ship through maneuvers that should have torn it apart. threading between spatial anomalies and using the turbulent currents of hyperspace itself as both shield and weapon. One hunter ship got too close to a gravity well and was crushed into a singularity. Another tried to match Kira's trajectory through a field of dark matter and simply vanished, its hull unable to withstand the stress. The third ship was more cautious, hanging back and peppering them with long-range fire. "They're trying to disable our engines," Kira said, sweat beading on her luminous skin. "They want you alive. Can you jump us somewhere else?" Jake asked. "Not while we're already in hyperspace. We need to drop into normal space first, and the moment we do, they'll be on us." Kira's eyes narrowed as she studied her displays. Unless what? "There's a debris field ahead, remnants of an old battle from the Convergence War. If I drop us there, the interference might hide us long enough to recalculate a jump." She looked at him. "But it's dangerous. The field is full of active weapon systems, automated defenses that fire on anything that moves." "As opposed to the people actively shooting at us now," Jake said. Kira almost smiled. "Point taken. Brace yourself." The transition from hyperspace to normal reality hit like a physical blow. Jake's vision doubled, then tripled, before snapping back into focus. They were surrounded by a vast graveyard of ships, twisted metal and shattered hulls stretching in every direction. Some of the wrecks were massive, the size of cities, their broken superstructures still radiating faint energy signatures. The hunter ship dropped into the field behind them, its weapons hot and ready. But before it could fire, the nearest derelict came alive. Ancient turrets rotated, targeting systems awakening after millennia of sleep. Beams of white-hot energy lanced out, catching the hunter ship broadside. "Go, go, go!" Jake urged as the entire debris field began to wake up, automated defenses engaging anything with an active power signature. Kira sent their ship weaving between the wrecks, using them as cover while her systems calculated their next jump. Behind them, the hunter ship wasn't so lucky. It tried to retreat, but ran straight into a cluster of proximity mines. The explosion lit up the field like a newborn star. "Jump calculated," Kira announced. "Coordinates locked." "Where are we going?" "The only place they won't follow," she said. "The Shattered Zone." Before Jake could ask what that meant, the ship leaped back into hyperspace, leaving the debris field and its ancient guardians behind. But he could see the tension in Kira's shoulders, the way her hands gripped the controls just a little too tight. Whatever the Shattered Zone was, even she was afraid of it. The Shattered Zone looked exactly like its name suggested. Kira brought them out of hyperspace into a region where reality itself seemed fractured, broken into pieces that didn't quite fit together. Through the view screen, Jake could see fragments of normal space bleeding into dimensions that hurt to look at directly. Colors that shouldn't exist pulsed along the edges of each rift, and the stars beyond were twisted into shapes that made his eyes water. "This is insane," Jake breathed. "What happened here?" The final battle of the Convergence War. Kira navigated carefully, her ship sliding through the gaps between spatial fractures. The Tyranny and the Coalition forces used weapons that tore holes in space itself. The damage never healed. This entire sector has been quarantined for 9,000 years. "And you think we'll be safe here?" "Safe is relative, but the bounty hunters won't follow. The navigation alone would kill most pilots, and the things that live in the rifts are worse." She pointed to a massive structure ahead, visible through one of the more stable fractures. "That's where we're going." Jake squinted at the shape. It looked like a ring, maybe 30 kilometers in diameter, constructed from the same flowing material as Kira's ship, parts of it phased in and out of visibility, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "What is that?" "A Tyranny vault, one of 7 that were never found by the Coalition." Kira's voice carried a mix of reverence and sorrow. "My people died protecting these. The knowledge they contain could reshape the galaxy, could end wars or start new ones." The ship approached the ring structure, and Jake noticed something odd. "There are other ships here, wrecks, failed attempts to breach the vault. The defenses don't discriminate." Kira brought them closer, her movements precise and controlled. "Watch." A piece of debris, maybe a chunk of ice or rock, drifted too close to the ring. Energy cascaded across its surface, and the object simply ceased to exist, erased from reality, as if it had never been. The vault defenses read genetic signatures. Anything that doesn't carry Tyranny DNA gets eliminated. "But I'm human," Jake protested. "You're human with Tyranny sequences. Let's see if that's enough." Kira guided the ship through the ring's outer perimeter. Jake held his breath, waiting for the obliteration that never came. Instead, the ring pulsed with soft light, almost welcoming. "Incredible," Kira whispered. "It accepts you." They passed through layers of defense, each one scanning them before allowing passage. Finally, they docked at a platform that extended from the ring's inner surface. The moment Kira opened the airlock, Jake felt a change in the air. It was warmer here, filled with a subtle vibration that resonated in his bones. "Stay close," Kira commanded, leading him down the boarding ramp. "The vault's interior is adaptive. It might react unpredictably to your presence." The passage beyond the docking platform was beautiful in an alien way. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with bioluminescent light. Symbols Jake couldn't read scrolled across every surface, information or warnings in a language 10,000 years dead. Kira moved through the corridors with confidence, but Jake noticed her hand never strayed far from the weapon at her hip. They entered a vast chamber that made Jake's breath catch. It stretched upward into darkness, lined with countless crystalline pods. Each one contained something, artifacts or samples or data cores, all perfectly preserved. "This is just one archive room," Kira said. "There are thousands like it throughout the vault." "What are we looking for?" Jake asked. "Answers." Kira approached a central console, its surface covered in the same flowing script as the walls. "I need to understand what makes you compatible with our technology, why your bloodline can interface with systems designed for Tyranny genetics." She placed her hand on the console, and it came alive beneath her touch. The symbols rearranged themselves, responding to her presence. Then Kira gestured for Jake to approach. "Put your hand next to mine." Jake hesitated, then did as she asked. The moment his skin made contact with the console, the entire room exploded into light. Data streamed across every surface, moving too fast for his eyes to follow. The crystalline pods began to glow, one after another, activating in sequence. "It's reading you," Kira said, her voice filled with awe. "The vault is accessing its deepest archives, pulling data that hasn't been viewed in millennia." Images materialized in the air around them. Jake saw worlds he'd never imagined, civilizations that rose and fell before humanity discovered fire. He saw the Tyranny at the height of their power, ships beyond counting spreading across the galaxy. And then he saw the war, the convergence forces rising against them, the battles that destroyed entire star systems. There, Kira pointed to a specific image that had frozen in the air. It showed a laboratory, Tyranny scientists working with genetic material. This is what they were doing. My people were trying to create a universal genetic key, something that could interface with any biological system. They wanted to preserve their knowledge in a form that could survive even if the Tyranny went extinct. They succeeded, Jake said quietly. That's what got into my great-great-grandmother. Partially succeeded. The project was incomplete when the war started. The sequences they created were unstable, dangerous. Kira touched the image, and it expanded, showing molecular structures that hurt Jake's brain to perceive. They should have killed anyone they infected, but somehow when they mixed with human DNA, they stabilized. You're the completion of a 10,000-year-old experiment. The implications crashed over Jake like a wave. So I'm not just a key. I'm a blueprint. You're both, and more. Kira pulled up another set of data. The vault is showing me something else. Other human bloodlines with similar contamination. Not many, maybe a dozen scattered across known space, but they exist. Others like me, Jake said. Are they in danger too? They will be, once word spreads. The faction that hired those bounty hunters won't stop. And they're not the only ones looking. Kira's expression darkened. There are at least 6 major powers who would do anything to control the vaults. The Cerulean Collective, the Hyrax Empire, the Coalition Remnant. even some human factions who've learned what's at stake. A new alarm suddenly blared through the vault. Kira's head snapped toward the entrance, her eyes blazing bright. Someone followed us. You said they couldn't navigate the shattered zone, Jake protested. They shouldn't have been able to. Kira was already moving, pulling him away from the console. But someone just did. They ran through the corridors as the vault's defenses came alive around them. Energy barriers materialized, sealing off sections of the structure. Through the translucent walls, Jake could see ships entering the ring. Dozens of them, all different designs. That's impossible, Kira said. They're working together. Natural enemies, cooperating. Because of me, Jake realized. Because of what I can unlock. Yes. Kira pulled him into a side passage as weapons fire tore through the main corridor they'd just left. They must have pooled their resources, hired guides who knew the zone. This is worse than I thought. They emerged into another docking bay, smaller than the first. A single ship waited there, sleeker and faster looking than Kira's vessel. Emergency transport, she explained. Every vault has them. But before they could reach the ship, figures materialized around them. Not ships or soldiers, but projections, holographic representatives of the forces outside. Jake counted 7 distinct species, some he recognized from his studies, others completely alien. One of them stepped forward, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell. When it spoke, its voice echoed in Jake's mind rather than his ears. We offer terms. Surrender the human. Allow us access to the vault, and we grant you safe passage, Warrior Kira. And if I refuse? Kira's hand was on her weapon. Then we destroy the vault with all of you inside. The knowledge dies, but at least our enemies don't gain it. The projection gestured, and the view screen showed the massed fleet outside. We have sufficient firepower. This is not a bluff. Kira looked at Jake, and he saw the calculation in her eyes. She was weighing options, probabilities, trying to find a way out. There's a third choice, Jake said quietly. What? Kira asked. Jake stepped forward, addressing the projections directly. You want the vaults open? I can do that, but not for just one of you, for all of you. The energy being pulsed with what might have been surprise. Explain. The Turani didn't build these vaults to hoard knowledge. They built them to preserve it, to share it. Jake felt the words coming from somewhere deep inside, as if the genetic sequences in his blood were speaking through him. You're fighting over scraps when you could all benefit. I'll open every vault in the galaxy, make the knowledge available to everyone. No single faction controls it. No one gets an advantage. The human speaks wisdom, another projection said, a being that looked like living water. But how do we trust he'll keep his word? Because I'll help him, Kira said, moving to stand beside Jake, and I swear on my ancestors, on the memory of the Turani, that we'll see this through. The projections conferred in languages and methods Jake couldn't understand. Finally, the energy being spoke again. Agreed, but we send representatives with you, guards to ensure compliance. No, Kira said flatly. You'll send observers, unarmed, one from each faction. They can witness the opening of the vaults, report back to their people, but no guards, no weapons. More conferring, more debate. Jake could see the tension, centuries of mistrust and warfare playing out in the holographic gestures. Then, slowly, one by one, they agreed. This changes everything, the energy being said, the balance of power across the galaxy. Good, Jake replied. Maybe it's time for a new balance. The projections faded and the fleet outside began to withdraw, falling back to a safe distance. Kira let out a breath she'd been holding. You just committed us to an impossible task. There are 7 vaults scattered across the galaxy, each one in a location more dangerous than this. I know, Jake said, but it's better than starting another war. Kira studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You might survive this after all, human. Come on, we have observers to collect and a very long journey ahead. They boarded the emergency transport, and as they lifted off from the vault, Jake watched the shattered zone fall away behind them. He'd come here running for his life. Now he was leaving with a mission that would reshape everything. The thought terrified him. But looking at Kira, seeing the determination in her luminous eyes, he felt something else too. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. The first observer came aboard 3 hours later, when they rendezvoused with the fleet at the edge of the shattered zone. She was Hyrax, a species Jake had only seen in archive footage. Her skin was scaled and iridescent, shifting through colors as she moved, and her multiple eyes tracked everything simultaneously. She introduced herself as Observer Thessia and immediately began examining every inch of the ship with professional thoroughness. "I am here to witness, not interfere," Thessia said, her voice carrying a musical quality. "But I will report any deception to my empire." "Understood," Kira replied coolly. "Make yourself comfortable. This ship wasn't designed for passengers." 5 more observers joined them over the next day as they traveled to the rendezvous points. Each one represented a different faction, a different species, and they eyed each other with barely concealed hostility. Jake found himself playing mediator, keeping conversation civil, preventing the close quarters from erupting into violence. The last observer was human, and that shocked Jake more than anything. His name was Commander Chen, and he represented something called the Earth Coalition Intelligence Division. "Your government knows about this?" Jake asked him privately. "Some of us do. The secrets we've kept would terrify most people." Chen was older, maybe 60, with eyes that had seen too much. "We've been tracking the contaminated bloodlines for decades, trying to protect them, understand them. You were supposed to stay hidden on that mining station." "Didn't work out that way," Jake said dryly. "No, and now you've made yourself the most important human alive." Chen looked troubled. "I hope you understand what you've taken on. These factions have been at each other's throats for millennia. Opening the vaults might bring peace, or it might give them new weapons to destroy each other with. What would you have me do instead? Keep running? Let them fight over me?" Chen shook his head. "No, you made the right call. But stay smart, Jake. Trust Kira, she has the most to lose and the most to gain. Everyone else is playing angles you can't see." The warning stayed with Jake as they jumped towards the second vault. Kira had plotted a route that would take them to the most accessible repositories first, building a precedent before attempting the truly dangerous ones. Their first stop was a vault hidden inside a neutron star's gravity well, a location so extreme that only specialized ships could survive the approach. Kira's emergency transport was one such ship. "Barely, the margins are tight," she admitted as they began their descent toward the stellar remnant. "The gravity will tear us apart if I miscalculate by even a fraction." Jake strapped himself in tighter, watching the neutron star grow larger on the view screen. It was impossibly dense, a collapsed core of a dead sun that packed more mass than Earth's sun into a sphere only 20 kilometers across. Its surface churned with storms of exotic matter, and its magnetic field was strong enough to atomize anything not properly shielded. "How did the Turani build a vault here?" Observer Thessia asked, her scales flickering nervous colors. "They were willing to go where no one else could follow," Kira said. She was completely focused now, every movement precise, as she fought against gravitational forces that tried to crush them. This is why the vaults survived. Accessing them requires either Turani genetics or complete insanity. "And which are we demonstrating?" Commander Chen asked. "Both," Kira replied with grim humor. The ship screamed in protest as they dove deeper into the gravity well. Jake's vision began to tunnel, the crushing pressure making it hard to breathe, even with the ship's compensators running at maximum. Through the viewport, he could see the vault now, a structure that shouldn't exist, anchored to the neutron star's surface by technology he couldn't comprehend. They docked with a shudder that rattled Jake's teeth. Kira slumped in her seat, exhausted from the precision flying. "We're here, everyone out while we still can. The tidal forces are already stressing the hull." The vault's interior was similar to the first one, but adapted to the extreme environment. The walls were thicker, reinforced against the crushing gravity. Jake led the way to the central chamber, the observers following in tense silence. When he placed his hand on the access console, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Data flooded outward, filling the room with holographic displays. "Weapons technology," Observer Thessia breathed, her eyes tracking the information. "Energy systems we've never imagined. Medical advances," another observer said, "a being of living crystal. Cures for diseases that plague my people. Shipbuilding techniques," Chen added, studying a schematic. "Faster-than-light methods that make our drives look primitive." Kira stood beside Jake, her hand on his shoulder. "Remember our agreement. All of this gets shared. No one takes exclusive access." The observers nodded, some reluctantly. They spent the next hour cataloguing what they found, each one making recordings to bring back to their respective governments. Jake watched them work and realized the magnitude of what they'd started. This knowledge, replicated across all 7 vaults, would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. "We need to leave," Kira said finally. "The ship can't take much more of this gravity." They made the ascent even more carefully than the descent. Twice the ship's hull integrity dropped to critical levels, but Kira coaxed them through, her skill as a pilot the only thing keeping them alive. When they finally broke free of the gravity well, Jake saw several observers sag with relief. 2 down, Chen said. 5 to go. The third vault was easier to reach, but infinitely more dangerous. It sat in the ruins of a gas giant that had been shattered during the Convergence War, its fragments still orbiting each other in a deadly dance. Navigating the debris field required split-second timing and perfect spatial awareness. One wrong move and they'd be pulverized. Kira threaded them through with the same fierce concentration she'd shown at the neutron star. When they reached the vault hidden inside the largest fragment, Jake noticed something different. This one felt older somehow, more primal. The archives here focused on biological sciences, genetic manipulation, the fundamental building blocks of life. "This is what created you," Kira told Jake as they stood before displays showing the original genetic key project. "This is where my people tried to play God." Jake studied the information, seeing for the first time the full scope of what had been done. The Tyranny hadn't just been trying to preserve knowledge. They'd been trying to evolve, to transcend their biological limitations. The genetic key was meant to be the first step towards something greater. They failed, one observer said, a being that looked like animated smoke. The project was abandoned. "Not failed," Jake corrected. "Interrupted. The war stopped their work, but the foundation was sound. It just needed time and the right catalyst." He touched his chest. "It needed human DNA to complete the sequence." "What are you saying?" Kira asked sharply. "I'm saying this wasn't an accident." "Not entirely." Jake pulled up deeper files, information that had been buried in the archives. The Tyranny knew their empire was falling. Some of them, the scientists working on this project, they released the genetic sequences intentionally. They scattered them across the galaxy, hoping they'd find compatible species, hoping the work could continue even after the Tyranny were gone. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "You're the heir to their legacy," Thessia said quietly. "Not just a key, but a successor." "We're all successors," Jake replied. "Every species here, every civilization in the galaxy. That was the point. The Tyranny didn't want to hoard their knowledge. They wanted it to outlive them, to benefit whoever came after." They completed the documentation and returned to the ship. As they departed the shattered gas giant, Jake noticed the observers looking at him differently. There was less suspicion now, more curiosity, maybe even respect, but the journey was far from over. 4 vaults remained, each one presenting unique challenges. The 4th vault tested them in ways Jake hadn't anticipated. It was hidden in a region of space where multiple universes intersected, where reality became fluid and unpredictable. One moment they were in normal space, the next they'd shifted into a dimension where physics worked differently. Kira fought to keep the ship stable, while Jake tried not to go mad from the sensory overload. When they finally reached the vault, it existed in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously present in multiple realities. Accessing it required Jake to attune himself to frequencies that made his head pound and his vision blur. But he managed it, and the archives within revealed information about dimensional travel, parallel worlds, the very nature of existence itself. "This changes everything we know," Chen said, his face pale. "If this gets out, if people realize there are infinite realities, then they'll have to accept that their universe isn't the only one," Kira finished. "Perhaps that will bring some humility." The fifth and sixth vaults followed, each one pushing them to their limits. One was hidden in the heart of a black hole's accretion disk, another in a region of space where time itself had fractured. Jake felt himself changing with each vault they opened, the genetic sequences in his blood activating, evolving. He could sense things now that he couldn't before, patterns in space, and energy that others missed. "You're becoming something new," Kira told him one night as they travelled between vaults. "The genetic key is completing itself inside you." "I know," Jake said. "I can feel it. Sometimes I dream in languages I've never learned, see equations I've never studied. The Turani knowledge is integrating with my mind. Does it frighten you?" "Terrifies me, but I can't stop it now, even if I wanted to." He looked at her. "What happens when we open the last vault? When this is all over?" Kira was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but I think you'll have a choice to make. The genetic key could spread to others, be shared with your species, or it could remain unique to you. What would you do?" "I'd share it. Knowledge is meant to grow, not stagnate." She smiled slightly, "But then I'm biased. I've spent my whole life searching for someone who could help complete my people's final work. The seventh vault was the hardest of all. It sat in a region known as the Dead Zone, where an ancient superweapon had been detonated during the final days of the Convergence War. The explosion had killed everything within 1,000 light-years, sterilized entire star systems, and left behind radiation that still made the region uninhabitable. "This is suicide," Chen said flatly when Kira revealed their destination. "Nothing can survive in the Dead Zone. The vault can. The vault does." Kira's expression was grim. "This is where the Turani stored their most dangerous knowledge, weapons capable of destroying suns, technologies that could unmake reality itself. They hid it in the one place no one would dare to look." The journey into the Dead Zone was like descending into hell. The ship's sensors screamed warnings as radiation levels spiked beyond safe limits. The observers huddled in the most shielded compartment, while Kira and Jake pushed forward, protected by enhancements the genetic key provided. The vault itself was a fortress, its defenses still active after 10,000 years. It took Jake 3 hours to bypass the security systems, each layer more complex than the last. When they finally breached the inner chamber, what they found made everyone fall silent. Weapons, yes, destructive technologies beyond imagining, but also something else. Data on how to reverse the damage done by such weapons. How to heal worlds, restore destroyed ecosystems, bring life back to dead zones. They learned, Jake said softly. By the end, the Turani learned that creation is harder than destruction. These archives show both because they wanted future civilizations to understand the cost of war. They documented everything, completing the survey of all 7 vaults. As they prepared to leave the Dead Zone, Jake felt the genetic key reach its final stage. The activation was painful, like every cell in his body rewriting itself simultaneously. When it passed, he was still human, still himself, but something more as well. "It's done," he said to Kira. "The key is complete." She nodded, and he saw tears in her luminous eyes. "My people's last gift to the galaxy. Thank you for seeing it through." They emerged from the Dead Zone to find the galaxy holding its breath. News of what they'd done had spread. The 7 vaults stood open, their knowledge available to all. Factions that had been enemies for centuries were now forced to cooperate, to share information, to find common ground. It wouldn't bring instant peace. Jake knew that. Centuries of conflict couldn't be undone overnight. But it was a start, a foundation upon which something better could be built. As they headed back to human space, to Earth itself where Jake would finally understand his place in this new galaxy, he felt Kira's hand slip into his. "I found you," she said quietly. "After searching the whole galaxy, I found you, "And I found a reason to matter," Jake replied. "Thank you for that." The ship carried them toward whatever came next, two beings from different worlds united by purpose and possibility. Behind them, the vaults pulsed with ancient light, no longer tombs of dead knowledge, but beacons of hope. The Taurani were gone, but their legacy lived on, and the galaxy would never be the same.